Welcome to Picks with the Professor, the show where a real statistics professor gives you sports betting tips. I'm your host, Professor Sides, and I have built a set of mathematical models named Sideline to predict various sports outcomes. You'll hear more about the baseball model in the course of this episode, set to cover 5 Major League Baseball games scheduled to be played on Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023. In case you're new here, check out the webpage on the banner. It's www.pickswiththeprofessor.com/new for some explanations and community rules. Remember, if you're interested in picks and projections for every single game, along with access to our Discord chat, we've got a lot of great NBA playoff, NHL playoff, MMA, golf, tennis, all sorts of good betting tips and content from me and other sports bettors in that Discord chat, and a lot of fun, of course, as well. You can get there on Dub Club. The subscription costs under $1 per day. That link is in the show description. Remember that sports are unpredictable, so the discussion on this show projects a typical game, does not try to forecast it to a T, as it'd be a foolish and impossible goal. We take a long-term view around here and don't get distracted when, the Guardians are cruising right along and then somehow blow both games and lose by one on a Sunday doubleheader. It was a pretty impressive feat, but stuff like that's going to happen in baseball. It balances out in the long run. It's hard to foresee before it happens, but we're going to have good breaks and bad breaks, and we're just focused on the overall result. We're not going to try to get rich overnight. This is a long, slow, and steady, grinded out season, and there's a lot of money to be made out there. But every day, unfortunately, can't be profitable. We're profitable for the season. The totals are looking good. Those A-plus plays the day over in Dub Club looking good. The A-grade plays looking good. All sorts of good things. But unfortunately, as much as I'd like to say every single day be profitable, that's just an impossible reality for any gambler. Unfortunately, no day games on Tuesday, but a solid slate of games. So we'll get right to it here. But before we do, some quick reminders. Please hit that like button if you're on YouTube. Also, if you aren't yet, please consider subscribing or following. It's free. And if you turn on notifications, you won't miss any of the college basketball, MLB, or college football content that this channel provides. A-grade moneyline plays return 4 units. That is, the risk plus win will equal 4. That way, we risk proportionally more on favorites than dogs. It's kind of like flat betting, but a little bit more intense and helps us scale. Helps us. I was looking at this the other day actually, and I had 2 plays that were kind of like on back-to-back rows of the sheet. Again, the Google sheet showing all the results and a lot of good information. I have the starting pitcher database rankings in there, team information, all that good stuff in that Google sheet. Again, that link's in the show description as well. In that sheet, I think there was one that was like a minus 150 and a minus 200 back to back. And by scaling this way, the amount that we risked in that minus 200 was only like 0.2 of a unit more than that minus 150 was. We obviously won a little bit less as well, but it's kind of the way to, take a little bit of the win and a little bit of the risk and a little bit of the win on the brunt of some of those bigger favorites. It allows us to play some of these bigger favorites that are good values. The Astros were great values this weekend on the money line. All 3 of them won, right? And that was the bottom line, was that the probability that the Astros won those games was higher than the implied probability that we could get on sports books. And this kind of keeps all that on the table. And it helps with dogs too. There's times when you want to take a big dog where you just think the price is too high, there's value on it. I'm not taking them yet. Just a little bit of a quick teaser here, but I am eyeing the A's here on Tuesday, going up against a weaker pitcher for the Mariners. Not on Monday against Castillo by any stretch of the imagination, but on Tuesday. And not to say they can't win on Monday against Castillo, because anything can happen, right? It's just the price isn't there for me. But I'm looking at it on Tuesday, right? You can look at run line, you can look at the big plus odds and the money line, and the bottom line is, if I decide to play them on the money line, I'm waffling right now. Still got some time to think about it. But, I just don't like risking, flat betting, risking a full unit on those plus dogs when I'm getting huge plus odds like that. I don't have to risk that much to win that much. So I'd rather scale it back. This kind of allows us the opportunity to do that. But I want more on the A grades and the B grades and the C grades. That's why they add up to 4, 3, or 2, depending on what the grade is. You'll see that in the banner on the screen as we go through the plays, and total bets are always just flat bet. Went a little bit less on totals because they're more variable, but that's just the way I do it. You'll see it again on the screen. With regards to the scaling, with regards to the picks, as always, take what you like and leave the rest. Starting us off 6:10 p.m. Eastern, White Sox at the Guardians. With regards to the side, the model says that Guardians minus 110 is the direction it would go, but only a C grade. Something says it should be Guardians minus 106. So Guardians minus 110, not a terrible play. I am looking at it to get to minus 105 or better before I play it. That would be a B grade. If it gets to Guardians plus 105, that would be an A grade. I wouldn't mind backing Logan Allen. He's looked pretty good so far in his 5 major league starts. Obviously, a highly regarded prospect and a guy who's somewhere between league average and already slightly better, which is pretty good for a rookie. But the bottom line is at minus 110. I just can't quite get behind them here. It's just not quite good enough of a price. So that's why it gives us C grid. I'm holding off. I'm waiting for minus 105. But the pick I do like here is the under 8. Dylan Cease and Logan Allen are two pretty solid pitchers. Cease, as we've kind of talked about, has struggled a little bit this year. The underlying metrics aren't quite as bad as that 4.78 ERA, but he has such a track record of being a good pitcher. And I don't remember if it was these two pitchers or if it was Cease and someone else, but these two teams played last week, and I swear I made the comment, I like the under. I think Cousin Jared was on, and we talked about we like the under. One pitcher has to pitch well, and we've got the under. If both pitch well, it's an easy under. And the only way we don't win the under is if it goes extras and gets crazy, or if both pitchers blow up. And it's like, hey, I think one of these guys can pitch pretty well. Cleveland's, a little bit more of a pitcher-friendly ballpark for the most part, other than when it gets really hot in the summer there in Cleveland. And like I said, I like the under 8 here just because I think there's a decent chance that one of those guys pitches pretty well, and maybe both do. And I think, again, whichever game it was with Cease last week, I can't remember who his opponent was. Both of them pitched well, and it was like a 3-1 final or something. And that's the same sort of thing I'm looking at here. Both pitch well, we're looking 3-1. If one of them pitches well, we're looking, maybe 5-2, something like that. You might push at 6-2 or something. But I think 8 is a little bit too high. The model projects 7.3. Personally, I'd put this at 7.5 and dare someone to go under. And I probably still would look under, but it would be either a much weaker play or just a situation where I say, I've got limited bankroll like we all do, and I don't really want to put money on plays that I don't think are great edges. So 7.5 would be the number I'd hang. The fact that we can get under 8 was slightly better than normal odds. Minus 104 is even better. Just thinking a low scoring game here. Should be nice weather, around 70 degrees to start, mid 60s to close. Wind will be blowing in, though, at 5 to 10 miles an hour. So it's going to give the pitchers a little bit extra boost. And we've seen in Cleveland, sometimes that wind blows in and it can really knock down any home run. You got to really crush the ball to get it out. So I'm not expecting a ton of home runs. Neither offense has a ton of pop. Both sets of relievers are squaring around to look pretty good. Cleveland all season. White Sox now looking to get project a whole lot better now with who they have in their bullpen today than they were earlier in the season. Expect a low scoring game. If I can get Guardians minus 105, I'm jumping. But for now, I'm passing on the side and focusing my efforts on the under. I think under 8 is a solid investment. 6:40 p.m. Eastern, Cardinals at the Reds. I'm going to go back to the Cardinals here as an A grade. Don't know if the A grade play on Monday worked out or not, as I'm recording this on Monday afternoon. But Tuesday, I'm going A grade at minus 155. Sideline says it should be Cardinals minus 175, and anything Cardinals minus 157 or better gets it to an A grade. So you can see on screen they're risking almost 2.5 units to win a little over 1.5. It's not the most exciting price to lay minus 155, but I think the Cardinals are a great investment here. They obviously have the massively better offense, and the Reds offense is so right-handed heavy. The model just doesn't really like them going up against a righty and grades them as one of the worst graded offenses I've seen in my time doing this, giving them a versus right-hander grade of 68, where 100 is average, higher is more runs, lower is fewer runs. It's just not really excited about, the model's not really excited about this Reds offense. Wainwright gets about a league average grade. Hasn't looked great so far in his 3 starts this season, but of course has a pedigree of being good. And even though he hasn't looked great, model still thinks he can be an average pitcher. And I think an average pitcher against this Reds team is good enough to get the job done. The Reds are going to hit weaker pitchers, but against decent pitching, I just don't think they have it in them. So I think Wainwright can get the job done. Ashcraft is a guy who I've liked. I don't think he's quite as bad as that 4.84 ERA, but the bottom line is he's around a league average pitcher. And if you've got 2 league average pitchers, one going against the Cardinals offense, which is probably top 5 in baseball, one going against the Reds, which is probably bottom 5. And again, the Reds are going to have some decent counting stats because of their home ballpark. But when you look at park neutral statistics, I'm just not a big believer in this Reds offense. And I think there's just a huge gap between the offenses of both teams. The Reds relievers, not great overall. Cardinals relievers better. So I think once Wainwright hands the ball off to a reliever, I think the Cardinals are in decent shape. The Reds, I'm not sure how good a shape they'll be in pitching wise going up against a really good offense. Minus 155 gets an A grade for me for the Cardinals. Weather-wise, it's going to be low 80s to start, mid 70s to close. The wind will be blowing mostly across, maybe a tiny bit in, around 5 miles an hour, so not much of a wind effect. I'm not going to play the over 9.5, at least as of right now, but I am eyeing it. The model projects 10.8. I want to wait until the morning and see. So this might be an added play to Dub Club, depending on what the wind does. If we wake up tomorrow and the wind looks like it's going to be more across, That projected total is probably going to go up to 11. I don't mind going over 9.5. If it's more in, that total projection is probably going to drop into the lower tens. And at that point, that's not a big enough edge for me to go over 9.5. I'd go over 9 in a heartbeat, but I don't see that happening anywhere. Um, Again, Wainwright has struggled. I do think he's going to give up a few runs in that ballpark to the Reds. I just think the Cardinals are going to score a ton of runs. So, of course, another way you can look at this is the Cardinals team total over. It's going to be a high number, but I think what we've seen from their offense in the last couple of weeks in that ballpark against the Reds pitching, they should be able to name their score. And again, as long as the wind holds off across and that projected total stays around 11 in the morning, I'll probably be playing over 9.5 or even over 10. I just kind of want to hold off and make sure that wind isn't going to start knocking balls down. Um, because we've seen just as of late, I've seen a lot of times the morning weather change and all of a sudden the total will change by like half a run or something. So I'm just not jumping to play the total yet because it's 9.5. I'd be jumping if it was 9, but at 9.5, I'm not jumping, but I am looking at it. I think there's gonna be a lot of runs in this game. Like I said, I think the Cardinals name their score, and this isn't vintage Wainwright. So I don't think we're going to see like 8-0 Cardinals. I think it's more likely to be like 8-3 Cardinals or something like that. So I love the Cardinals and kind of eyeing the over, not an official play yet, but one I'm keeping my eye on. 7:10 p.m. Eastern, Dodgers at the Braves. Should be a great series here. Dodgers plus 180 gets a B grade from the model, but as you can see on screen there's no units there listed. That's why it's because I'm not playing this at this price yet. Model wants plus 185 before it gets to an A grade, and that's what I'm holding out for. Plus 180, I'm passing on the Dodgers. It's just not a good enough investment, but a plus 185, that's where it gets to an A grade, and A grades are just automatic plays for me. So plus 185, I'm playing it. Plus 180, you could play it at a half unit if you wanted or something small. It's just not for me. If I was going to play the Dodgers, I'd really be looking at the run line at the plus 1.5. I think this is going to be a really low scoring game. And you can see that on screen. My official pick on this one is a total play under 8.5. Model projects 7.3. And I just don't understand. The total picks have done really well for us. It did well for us last year. It's really just a lot about weather. And I don't quite understand why books and people haven't realized this yet. I hate putting this out there publicly because at some point people will figure it out and we'll lose our edge. But until then, we're just going to keep profiting. I'm trying to help everyone be a smarter, better. Like weather matters in baseball. And we've seen it in Atlanta as one of many parks where in the summer, when it's hot, wind blowing out, that thing plays tiny and you can get a ton of runs. But in colder weather, Atlanta plays pretty pitcher friendly. And you look at the weather and it's forecasted to be around 60 degrees for the totality of this game, lower 60s to start, upper 50s to close. 60 degrees isn't going to make the ball fly. And you're looking at a slight breeze in around 5 miles an hour. The park's going to play pretty big. And you've got probably the second best pitcher in baseball in Spencer Strider on the hill for the Braves. Great set of relievers for the Braves. You might maybe the two best sets of relievers in baseball, at least two of the top 5, with the Dodgers relievers, not far behind the Braves relievers in my projected ratings. Two good offenses for sure, but this is the top-notch pitching in baseball between the Braves relievers, the Dodgers relievers, and Spencer Strider. The only pitcher who's not top-notch is Bobby Miller for the Dodgers, but as a prospect, you never know what you're going to get from them. And a lot of times the prospects come up and the model gives them about a 110 grade, just doesn't really expect much from them for the first couple starts. It grades him out at league average, projects him to be decent. With the park playing pitcher friendly, the Braves will probably score a couple of runs, but I don't think they'll score that many. And again, the Dodgers don't have to let Miller go too long because they have great relievers behind him. I never expect Spencer Strider to give up too much. He will on occasion, but he's one of the better pitchers in baseball, and it's not even close. And he's for sure top 5, and he might be the second best pitcher, maybe the best healthy pitcher as of the moment with DeGrom on the IL. I just don't think there's a lot of runs. I trust the model's projection of 7.3 much more than the book's projection. I think this is going to come down in a hurry. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this closed 7.5, at least 8. I don't even know why we're getting 8. I don't know why we're getting the win on 8. I kind of would put this at 7 myself personally. I just don't think there's going to be that many runs in this game. And so I like the under. And because of that, I like the plus 1.5 for the Dodgers, maybe a little bit more than the money line, just because a low scoring game, it could easily be like 2-1 late Braves or something. And then you're not hoping that the Dodgers at that point, you're not hoping that they got to tie it up against a good Braves bullpen. And then they got to win it in extras, at 2-1, you're kind of like, hey, just end this thing now. And I've got my money. So if I'm looking at this one, I'm kind of thinking maybe Dodgers run line might be a decent play. But again, if it gets up to that plus 185, it's A grade and it's an auto play for me. Then it's just a question of, do you want to play the money line or the run line? Because it's low scoring, in my opinion, I think the run line is going to offer some good value. So it's kind of the way I'm eyeing it. But if nothing else, I've already locked in this underplay. I think this is way too many runs for that game. 7:40 p.m. Eastern, Mets at the Cubs. I think the Mets here at minus 108. It's a B grade pick. Sideline says it should be Mets minus 115. Minus 104 gets it to A grade territory. So we're only 4 cents away from an A grade. So we can call this a B plus pick. Senga for the Mets versus Smiley for the Cubs. Bottom line on this one is that Smiley's pitched pretty well so far in his 9 starts this season. But the underlying metrics suggest he's been pretty lucky. I don't think he's going to be able to keep it up. This Mets offense has gotten it going, is getting it going, has got it going in the late innings with the comebacks. I'm not really sure what's going on with this Mets offense. They at least look a little better here in the last week than they did the week before, which is just a constant reminder to people, never overreact to what happens in 1 week or a few days of baseball. Every team has stretches, right? This Mets team is definitely closer to the team that they've been looking like lately than the team that they were, the week before. Smiley coming back to earth, this is the perfect time for it to happen against, again, a pretty good Mets offense. Again, maybe not quite the same tier as the Dodgers and healthy Astros and that sort of thing, but pretty good offense here for the Mets still. So good chance for Smiley to come back to earth. Senga 3.77 ERA, slightly above average pitcher, but again, with the Cubs offense being around league average, that's the type of offense that Senga I think should be able to handle. So I think it just kind of sets up perfectly for the Mets here to win this one. Bullpen wise, it's probably about a toss up. Cubs maybe have a slight edge there, but I'm not sure it's really that much. And so the Mets offensive edge and starting pitcher edge, I think, is more than enough to overcome the home field edge here that the Cubs will have. Model says the Mets win this about 54% of the time. So we're getting basically coin toss pricing, but I think the Mets should be more favored than they are. Total in this game is 8. Model projects 7.9. We're looking at mid 60s for this game. Wind blowing in, but not quite a strong wind at Wrigley. This is definitely one that you got to check the updates. Update for Dub Clubbers here in the morning about what the projected total might be, because the weather there at Wrigley can change in a 12-hour span a ton. So for right now, I think it's pretty well priced, but who knows in the morning if the weather changes, maybe we'll be able to jump on it before the books realize. But for right now, it's a pass on the total. I think 8's pretty good price, hanging here with the Mets at this B plus grade pick just to get the outright win. And they're wrapping us up 7:40 p.m. Eastern, Giants at the Twins. Now we've got Alex Cobb. So I kind of want to talk about this for 2 reasons. Number one, you heard Jake and I talk about how much we love Alex Cobb. Number 2, I want to just remind everyone, a lot of you've probably heard this a lot last year. I don't think I've mentioned it a lot this year, but check out what your book offers, depending on which book you're at. And I've kind of looked around at some of the domestic ones. I'm living in Texas, so I'm only able to play at these when I'm the DraftKings and the FanDuel and those places when I'm on vacation at different states, right? So between those and your offshores, there's just a lot of different books with a lot of different options. Just a good reminder that you always want to select the listed pitcher when you're backing a pitcher that's good, like Alex Cobb. My rule of thumb is if it's a better than average pitcher, I want to have that where the bet is tied to that pitcher. Sometimes you want to tie it to the opposing pitcher based off if you think the opposing pitcher isn't very good. Sometimes you just want it either way, especially like if you have a bullpen game, you just want action on it because it doesn't really matter who's the first pitcher in the game. If it's an opener, whatever, that sort of thing. Or if you're backing a weaker pitcher and you think it's good value, you might want action on the game either way. So just be thinking about that as you make your bets. The further out you make them, you may have fewer options. Different books don't even have that option, but a lot of books still do. So just check that out because, the game yesterday, you want to, knowing that we were backing Alex Cobb, you wanted to back the Giants with Alex Cobb listed. That way, once he's not scratched, it's no play. And so that's just a good reminder, especially we get into the summer here and we're focused on baseball. We're going to have this sort of thing happen a lot, unfortunately. And so you kind of want to make sure that you're kind of get a little insurance policy there for those situations. I do still love Alex Cobb here. So back in the Giants at plus 124, A grade pick. Everything we said yesterday holds true. I think he's undervalued. Not that Sonny Gray isn't undervalued. 164 ERA himself. Underlying metrics say it should be a little bit worse than that, but he's having a great season and a great pitcher. I think both these guys are really good. There's a reason why this total is 7.5. Model says 7.3. If I had to play a total, I'd play the under. I'm not jumping to play under 7.5 though. If I was going to do anything, I'd probably hold out for 8. I think it will be a low scoring game. The books think it'll be a low scoring game. Problem is, it's going to be kind of a warm day for Minnesota standards. We're talking around 80 degrees to start, mid 70s to close. And it's important to keep in mind the temperature relative to what it normally is. Why is that? Because when we use park factors to determine what the total should be, the park factor is basically how does that park play? Well, we have to think about the average conditions of that park because the average conditions in Minnesota are very different than the average conditions, in Southern California or in Atlanta, right? Than in St. Louis or Kansas City. And so you get a lot more warmer days, say in Kansas City than in Minnesota. And so the park factor kind of accounts for that based off the kind of average temperature and how the ball's going to fly on average, what the wind normally does, that sort of thing. And so it's important to note that while Minnesota, you're talking about upper 70s for this game, and you might say that's not that warm. Relative to the average temperature of a game in Minnesota, it's fairly warm, which means it's going to play a lot smaller of a park than it normally does. And so that's kind of the reason why I'm holding off this under, because it's a relatively warm day for their standards. Otherwise, it'd be all over the under. But the ball's going to fly a little bit more than usual in that park because we don't tend to see a ton of games played in the 80 degrees other than the day games in Minnesota. And in the day games in Minnesota, you can see some double digit run score sometimes when it does warm up. So two great pitchers. I don't think we'll see a lot of runs. It's just not a big enough edge for me to play under 7.5. I'd be playing under 8, but not 7.5. So gonna pass on the total. But again, I love Alex Cobb. I think he's undervalued. Sideline says this should be Twins minus 112. The Twins win this 53% of the time. So if we go in 47% of the time at plus 124, that is a great play. This plus 124 just ekes into A grade value. That is the price needed for an A grade. So plus 124, plus 125, that's what gets you to the A grade according to Sideline. We just eke in there. But I think the Giants got relatively close to a 50-50 chance of pulling this off. Not quite there, but pretty close. Close enough for us to jump in at a price like this. Again, A grade for me. Wind mostly blowing across, maybe blowing in. Yet another one that I'm looking at in the morning here just to see what the wind does, because the difference between blowing across and blowing in at the 5 to 10 miles we're talking about here is easily a few tenths of a run. That could push the projected total down to 7. And at that point, I might be willing to jump at an under 7.5. So it just kind of depends on what the wind does. Some of these kind of tweener winds, we got to kind of get closer to the game and see, do they still look like that, or are they shifting one way or the other? Main play on this one, though, focusing on the Giants at plus 124, A grade for me. And that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Picks with the Professor. Don't forget to subscribe so you can ensure the sports betting content provided on this channel is dropped right into your feed. I'll be back again tomorrow with more baseball betting content. Until then, as always, best of luck. And remember, you can eat your betting money, but please don't bet your eating money.